Welcome to this Photoshop Creative video podcast where we're going to take a quick look at some of the finer points of using wet media brushes in Photoshop. I just want to talk for a little while here about how important it is that we actually set these wet media brushes up properly. Obviously this has got a lot to do with the brushes panel, which we're going to kind of have a quick look at in a moment or two, but I thought I'd start by just let me reset my brushes just so there's no confusion at all. Thought I'd start with exactly how to load the brush set if you're not familiar with this. Choose the brush tool, we'll click in the brush picker. This is the important little figure here, this small arrow in the top right of the brush picker itself. We'll simply click on that and we'll choose the wet media brushes from the list of available brush sets. Click OK to replace the currently displayed brushes or append to add this new wet media brush set to the currently displayed brushes. Saves a lot of confusion if we simply click OK to replace the current brushes, and you'll now see we have all these wet media brush presets available in the brush picker itself. Okay, now as I've actually pointed out in the tutorial in the magazine this month, it's very important that we actually set these brushes up properly. If we use them straight out of the box, as it were, let's go for this paint on rough texture, for instance. Let's choose a colour for the foreground, a nice kind of dark brown here for the roof. If I start to actually paint with this now at 100% opacity, you'll see it's not really that effective. You know, it's too opaque, it's covering up all of our lines that we've put down previously for the quick sketch that we did, and it's got this kind of waxy sort of crayon feel to it, which is really not what we want at all here. Let's just undo out of that. I'm working on a normal layer. Something we can do for a start is actually switch the blending mode for this layer to, for instance, colour burn. That will give us a nice interaction between the layer beneath and our wet brush layer. You'll see, however, still at this stage it's kind of messy, it's not really the effect we want. So what I do want to impress on you most of all here is how important your brush opacity setting is. If we reduce that to, I don't know, for the purposes of this demonstration, somewhere around kind of 50%, and then I start painting with this brush, you'll see this is actually a lot more effective. We've got the existing drawing actually showing through from underneath, and we've got a lot more of a kind of subtle brush here, and we can overlay brush strokes to increase the intensity and the opacity. Now this applies to all of these brushes really. Let's try this brush light texture medium tip brush. Once again, if we use it at 100% opacity, you'll see it's fairly strong. You know, I mean, this is quite a nice effect, but it's a little too strong for my liking. So once again, we can reduce the opacity to around about 50%, and we can get this nice kind of subtle effect that really shows up these nice brush strokes. Something else I would mention at this stage, let's just change our foreground colour so we can see what's going on just a bit better. You'll notice as you use these brushes that they're really very dependent on kind of brush size, and a lot of that has to do with the brush dynamics in the brushes palette itself. Display the brushes palette via window and brushes, and we'll get this huge kind of panel up here. One thing I want to draw your attention to here is this size control. You'll notice at the moment that if I apply a lot of pressure to the brush, I get this really nice thick stroke, and if I apply very, very little pressure indeed, I get this nice, really nice kind of sinuous thin stroke. Now that's quite important for the kind of oriental characters we actually write down the side of this image. But one of the most important things here is this minimum diameter slider. First of all, make sure that the size control is set to pen pressure, but the minimum diameter slider actually controls how wide the brush is when you use the least pressure. So if I set that to 0, let's just get a stronger colour here. If I set this minimum diameter to 0 and apply a very little pressure, you'll see I've got this really thin line. Well, if we increase the minimum diameter a little, once again use very little pressure, you'll see now with the least pressure on my stylus I'm producing this much thicker line. You can actually see this reflected in the stroke thumbnail at the bottom here. Once again, increase it a bit more, and with very little pressure I've got a really nice thick line. So if your brush isn't actually reacting the way you want it to, I would actually draw your attention to this minimum diameter slider. Okay, so have a good explore of these wet media brushes and bear these points in mind, and you'll find that they're really very effective, but they just need a little coaxing to produce the kind of marks that we're looking for.